Part 1, The Unexpected Prisoner. The Awakening in Chains. Colonel Marcus Webb woke up to the worst headache of his military career, which was saying something considering he'd survived 3 alien bombardments and a direct hit from a plasma cannon. The metallic taste in his mouth suggested blood, and the cold surface beneath him felt distinctly non-human. Great, he thought, I'm still alive, which means they want something from me. The room slowly came into focus through his blurred vision. Smooth walls that seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, no windows, and bars that hummed with energy. Definitely not a human prison. Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his ribs. Someone had patched up his wounds while he was unconscious. The unexpected visitor. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Multiple legs, clicking against the floor in a rhythm that made Marcus's skin crawl. He'd heard that sound before, right before his unit got wiped out in the battle for New Geneva. Zephyrians. The bug-like aliens who'd been systematically destroying human colonies for the past 2 years. The energy bars flickered and disappeared. A tall, insectoid figure entered the cell, carrying what looked like medical supplies. Marcus tensed, expecting torture devices, but the alien simply set down a tray of bandages and some kind of healing gel. "You are awake," the creature said in accented but clear English. Its voice had an odd, musical quality that didn't match its frightening appearance. "Good. Your species heals remarkably fast." Marcus stared at his captor. The Zephyrian stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to analyze everything at once. Its carapace was a deep purple color, marked with silver stripes that indicated high rank. This wasn't some grunt soldier. This was someone important. The confusing kindness. "Let me guess," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "You patch me up, then start asking questions about human military strategies. When I don't talk, you start removing body parts until I do." The alien tilted its head in what might have been confusion. "I am Warden Kelthera. I oversee this detention facility. You will not be tortured, Colonel Webb." The fact that it knew his name and rank wasn't surprising. What was surprising was the complete lack of malice in its voice. Marcus had interrogated enough prisoners to recognize when someone was playing psychological games. This didn't feel like a game. "Why?" Marcus asked bluntly. "Your people have been slaughtering mine for 2 years. Why show mercy now?" Kelthera's compound eyes focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. "Because I have studied your species extensively, Colonel. Your people's capacity for both destruction and creation fascinates me. You fight with incredible ferocity when threatened, yet you also risk your lives to save strangers." The warden's observation. The alien moved closer, and Marcus fought every instinct telling him to attack. Even wounded, he might be able to take down one Zephyrian. But something in the creature's posture suggested it wasn't here to harm him. "During our assault on your colony ship Meridian, my scouts reported something unusual," Kelthera continued. "Human soldiers breaking formation to rescue civilians, even when it meant certain death. One of your medics continued treating wounded enemies even as our forces advanced. Such behavior makes no tactical sense." Marcus remembered the Meridian. He'd lost good people in that battle, including his best friend Lieutenant Torres, who died covering the evacuation of a medical bay. "We don't abandon our own," he said quietly. "No," Kelthera agreed. "You do not. Even when logic demands it. Even when survival requires it. This troubles my superiors greatly." The warden picked up one of the medical devices and began scanning Marcus's injuries. The colonel tensed, but the procedure seemed genuinely diagnostic rather than harmful. The unexpected revelation. "Your high command has ordered the execution of all human prisoners," Kelthera said matter-of-factly while working. "They believe your species is too dangerous to be allowed to survive, even in captivity." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold cell. "So why am I still breathing?" Kelthera paused in its medical examination. Because I have begun to question whether we truly understand what we are fighting. Your people's actions suggest something my leaders refuse to acknowledge. Which is that perhaps we are not the superior species we believe ourselves to be. The admission seemed to cost the alien considerable effort. My people value logic, efficiency, survival of the collective above all else. But your species displays something we have never truly comprehended. Marcus waited, sensing this was important. Hope, Kelthera said finally. Even facing total annihilation, humans continue to believe in tomorrow. It is simultaneously your greatest weakness and your most terrifying strength. The warden finished its examination and stepped back. Your injuries are healing well. You will live, Colonel Webb. The question is what you will choose to do with that life. As Kelthera left the cell, the energy bars flickered back to life. Marcus was alone again, but something had fundamentally changed. For the first time since the war began, he'd met an alien who saw humans as more than just targets to be eliminated. The real question was, what was he going to do about it? Part 2, The Warden's Dilemma. The weight of orders. Warden Kelthera stood in her private chamber, staring at the holographic message that had arrived 3 hours ago. The words of High Commander Xylos burned in her mind like acid: execute all human prisoners immediately. No exceptions. No delays. Her 4 hands trembled slightly as she replayed the message. 23 human prisoners under her care, including the colonel who had shown such remarkable composure despite his injuries. In her 17 years of service, she had never questioned a direct order. Today, everything felt different. The wall display showed surveillance footage from the human cells. Most of the prisoners sat quietly, some tending to wounded cellmates, others sharing what little food they had. Even in captivity, facing certain death, they continued to care for each other. Such behavior defied everything she had been taught about inferior species. Memories of study. Kelthera's interest in humans had begun 3 years ago when she first encountered their historical records. While her people studied enemy tactics and weaknesses, she had become fascinated by human culture, their art, their stories of sacrifice and redemption. She remembered reading about a human concept called mercy, showing compassion to those who had wronged you. Her species had no equivalent word. Justice meant punishment, weakness meant elimination, survival meant victory at any cost. Yet humans regularly chose to spare their enemies, often to their own detriment. The door chimed, interrupting her thoughts. Enter, she called, quickly closing the execution order. Sub-Commander Vrex scuttled into the room, his younger carapace gleaming with nervous energy. Warden, the High Commander's message arrived hours ago. The other officers are asking when the executions will begin. Kelthera turned away from him, looking out at the prison complex through her window. Tell me, Vrex, what do you know about human behavior under stress? They become unpredictable, dangerous, he replied automatically. Why do you ask? The dangerous question. Have you observed them since their capture? Kelthera asked, gesturing toward the surveillance screens. Watch cell block 7. On the monitor, a wounded human soldier was sharing his water ration with a barely conscious cellmate, even though both men were clearly dehydrated. In the next cell, another human was using strips from his own clothing to bandage a stranger's infected wound. Vrex chittered uncomfortably. They are helping each other. Yes, Kelthera said softly. Even now, facing execution, they choose cooperation over self-preservation. Does this seem like the behavior of an inferior species to you? Warden, Vrex said carefully, such questions border on heresy. The High Command has determined that humans are a threat to galactic stability. Their unpredictable nature makes them dangerous. Kelthera knew he was right. Questioning the wisdom of the High Command was indeed heresy. But she could not dismiss what she had witnessed. What if their unpredictability is not a flaw, but a strength? What if we have misunderstood them entirely? The Colonel's wisdom. Later that evening, Kelthera found herself walking to Colonel Webb's cell. She told herself it was for a final medical check, but in truth, she needed to understand something that had been bothering her since their first conversation. Webb was sitting against the wall, eyes closed but clearly awake. He opened them as she approached. "Back for another chat, Warden? Or is this goodbye?" "You know about the execution order," she said. It wasn't a question. "Your sub-commander isn't as quiet as he thinks," Webb replied. "The question is, why haven't you carried it out yet?" Kelthera deactivated the energy bars and stepped into the cell, something that violated every security protocol. "Tell me something, Colonel. Your people face extinction. Your colonies burn, your fleets are scattered. Yet you continue to fight with honor, to show mercy to prisoners, to risk everything for strangers. Why?" Webb studied her for a long moment. "Because that's what makes us human. Take away our compassion, our hope, our willingness to sacrifice for others, and we become something else entirely. Something not worth saving." "But such behavior is illogical," Kelthera protested. "It weakens your species, makes you vulnerable." "Does it?" Webb asked. "Or does it make us stronger than you realize?" The revelation of strength. "Explain," Kelthera demanded. Webb struggled to his feet, moving carefully. "Your people fight as individuals, even in groups. Each Zephyrian looking out for themselves, following orders because that's how you survive. But humans? We fight for each other. A human soldier will charge into impossible odds not for glory or duty, but because their friend needs help." He gestured toward the other cells. "Look at these men and women. They know they're going to die, but they're still taking care of each other. That's not weakness, Warden. That's the kind of strength your people can't understand because you've never experienced it." Kelthera felt something shift inside her, a fundamental crack in everything she had believed. "You are saying that your apparent weakness is actually power?" "I'm saying that a species that values the individual as much as the collective, that chooses hope over despair, compassion over cruelty, that species might be worth learning from instead of destroying." The Warden stood in silence for several minutes, processing this conversation. Everything in her training told her that Webb was manipulating her, using psychological warfare to delay his execution. But her observations over the past weeks suggested otherwise. The impossible choice. "If I were to delay the executions," Kelthera said slowly, "what would you do with that time?" Webb's eyes sharpened. "What any human would do. Try to find a way to save everyone, my people and yours." "Impossible. We are at war. Wars end, Warden. The question is whether they end in mutual destruction or mutual understanding." Kelthera reactivated the energy bars and stepped back, her mind churning with possibilities and dangers. "I will consider your words, Colonel." As she walked away, Webb called after her. "Kelthera? When you make your choice, remember that mercy isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do." Back in her chamber, the execution order still glowed on her desk. For the first time in her career, Warden Kelthera was about to disobey a direct command. She deleted the message and began composing a report about technical difficulties with the execution chamber. She had bought them time. Now she had to figure out what to do with it. Part 3, The Hidden Truth. The Secret Laboratory. Dr. Nathaniel Cross pressed his face against the cold ventilation grate, watching the Zephyrian scientists work in the laboratory below. For 3 weeks, he had been hiding in the air ducts of the research facility, surviving on stolen rations and pure determination. What he had discovered would change everything, if he could live long enough to share it. The facility wasn't what the Zephyrians claimed it was. While his captors believed he was dead, killed in the bombing of Research Station Omega, Nathaniel had been systematically infiltrating their most classified projects. What he found horrified him more than any weapon of war. Through the grate, he could see Zephyrian researchers examining data streams that looked disturbingly familiar. The quantum signatures, the energy patterns, the communication frequencies, they were identical to the ones that had triggered the first attacks on human colonies 2 years ago. The impossible evidence. Nathaniel carefully activated his hidden recording device, a piece of human technology so small that even detailed Zephyrian scans had missed it. The conversation below was being conducted in scientific notation, but he had spent enough time studying their language to understand the basics. The manipulation continues to function perfectly, one scientist chittered to another. Both species respond exactly as the architects predicted. Humans with their emotional responses, Zephyrians with their logical ones. The architects. Nathaniel had heard that term whispered in the darkest corners of the facility, always spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence. Whatever they were not Zephyrian. They were not human either. His blood ran cold as he watched the lead scientist display holographic projections showing human and Zephyrian fleet movements. Every major battle, every strategic decision, every seemingly random encounter, they had all been orchestrated. Both species were dancing to someone else's tune. The puppet masters revealed. The laboratory door hissed open, and a figure entered that made Nathaniel's breath catch in his throat. It wasn't Zephyrian, wasn't human, wasn't like anything he had ever seen. The creature moved with fluid grace, its form seeming to shift and change as it walked. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that hurt to hear. Progress report, the creature demanded in a language that somehow translated itself directly into Nathaniel's mind. Excellent, Architect Prime, the lead Zephyrian scientist replied, its voice filled with the kind of reverence usually reserved for deities. Human and Zephyrian forces continue to reduce each other's numbers according to projections. At current rates, both species will be sufficiently weakened within 6 months. Nathaniel gripped the grate so hard his knuckles turned white. The entire war was a setup. Humans and Zephyrians weren't natural enemies, they were being manipulated into destroying each other by a third party. And what of the anomalies? Architect Prime asked. The reports of cooperation between the species? Isolated incidents, the scientist assured it. The conditioning protocols are holding. Both species remain convinced the other is their greatest threat. The terrible plan. The architect moved to a control console and activated a galaxy-wide display. Nathaniel watched in horror as thousands of red dots appeared across the star map, each one representing a civilization that had been manipulated into self-destruction over the past millennium. Humans and Zephyrians represent the final obstacles to our expansion in this sector, Architect Prime explained to the assembled scientists. Their combined fleets are too powerful to face directly, but turned against each other, they become manageable. What of the survivors? Asked another scientist. Survivors serve our purposes as well. Broken civilizations make excellent slave labor. The few humans and Zephyrians who remain will mine the resources we need for further expansion. Nathaniel felt sick. Entire species reduced to tools for someone else's galactic conquest. How many civilizations had fallen to this same strategy? How many others were fighting manufactured wars at this very moment? The desperate alliance. As the meeting continued, Nathaniel began planning his escape. The information he had gathered was too important to die with him in these vents. But first, he needed to make contact with someone who could help spread the truth. His thoughts turned to the rumors he had heard about a Zephyrian prison warden who had been asking uncomfortable questions about human prisoners. If those stories were true, if there really was a Zephyrian questioning the war, then perhaps there was hope. Using his hidden communicator, Nathaniel began composing a message. It would have to be sent through back channels, coded in scientific data that wouldn't trigger security protocols. The risk was enormous. If intercepted, the message would reveal his location and ensure his death. But the alternative was watching two species destroy each other while their true enemy waited in the shadows. The message sent. The transmission took 17 minutes to code and compress. 17 minutes during which any Zephyrian security sweep could have detected him. When he finally sent the message, Nathaniel felt like he had just rolled dice with the fate of the galaxy. The message was simple: coordinates to the research facility, proof of the architect's existence, and a desperate plea for cooperation between humans and Zephyrians. He addressed it to every communication frequency used by both species, hoping that someone, somewhere, would listen to reason. As alarms began blaring throughout the facility, Nathaniel knew his hiding place had been discovered. Security forces were already sealing the ventilation system. He had maybe 10 minutes before they reached his position. 10 minutes to delete all evidence of his presence. 10 minutes to destroy the backup data stores. 10 minutes to ensure that when they caught him, his captors would learn nothing about what he had discovered. The race against time. Moving through the ducts with desperate speed, Nathaniel reached the facility's main data core. The quantum storage units contained backup copies of every experiment, every communication with the architects, every piece of evidence he had just transmitted to the galaxy. His portable virus, designed specifically to corrupt Zephyrian data systems, would need 3 minutes to spread through their network. He could hear security forces cutting through vent grates just 2 sections away. They would reach him in less than 2 minutes. Nathaniel activated the virus and began crawling toward the facility's power core. If he could cause a system overload, the resulting electromagnetic pulse would wipe the remaining data and give his message more time to spread before the architects could suppress it. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. Plasma cutters, chittering voices, the electronic beeps of detection equipment. They knew exactly where he was now. With 30 seconds to spare, Nathaniel reached the power core and placed his final surprise: a human demolition charge scavenged from the wreckage of his transport. As security forces burst through the grate behind him, he smiled and pressed the detonator. The explosion would be visible from orbit. More importantly, the message he had sent was already reaching its destinations across the galaxy. The truth was out there now, spreading through communication networks faster than the architects could contain it. As consciousness faded, Dr. Nathaniel Cross's last thought was a prayer that someone would believe what he had discovered, and that humanity and the Zephyrians would find each other before it was too late. Part 4: The Unlikely Alliance. The Impossible Message. Captain Joran Blackwood crouched in the ruins of the communications outpost, staring at the data pad that had just changed everything he thought he knew about the war. The transmission from Dr. Cross had reached him through a chain of desperate relay stations, each message fragment more unbelievable than the last. The Zephyrians weren't the real enemy. Neither species was. They were both being manipulated by creatures called architects, puppet masters who had orchestrated the entire conflict for their own purposes. The evidence was overwhelming, and it made Joran sick to his stomach. Around him, the surviving members of his Special Forces unit waited for orders. 12 humans, all that remained of the battalion that had been fighting on this hellish planet for 6 months. They looked to him for leadership, for hope, for some way to strike back at their enemies. "Captain?" Sergeant Mills asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Joran looked up from the data pad, his mind racing through impossible possibilities. "We're about to do something that goes against every piece of military training we've ever received. The enemy becomes ally." The Zephyrian patrol was moving through the canyon below, following a route that Joran's team had been planning to ambush for weeks. 6 alien soldiers, heavily armed and dangerous. Under normal circumstances, this would be target practice. But nothing about this situation was normal anymore. Joran activated his suit's translation protocols and stepped out from behind cover, hands raised but ready to fight if necessary. The Zephyrian patrol immediately trained their weapons on him, chittering in their alien language. "I need to speak with your commander," Joran called out in broken Zephyrian. "I have information about the real enemy." The patrol leader, distinguished by the golden markings on its carapace, stepped forward cautiously. "You are Captain Blackwood. There is a significant bounty on your capture." "I know," Joran replied. But right now, capturing me might be the worst mistake your species could make. We need to talk. For a moment that felt like eternity, the alien soldiers maintained their firing positions. Then, inexplicably, the patrol leader lowered its weapon. Speak quickly, human. My patience is limited. The revelation shared. Joran transmitted Dr. Cross's data package to the Zephyrian leader's communication device. He watched as the alien's compound eyes processed the information, its posture gradually shifting from hostility to confusion to something that might have been horror. This intelligence suggests. The patrol leader began, then stopped, chittering softly to itself. The architects. We have legends of such beings, from the earliest days of our expansion into space. But they were myths, stories told to frighten children. Not myths, Joran said grimly. Dr. Cross died getting us this information. Every battle we've fought, every colony destroyed, every life lost, it's all been orchestrated by these creatures. The Zephyrian soldiers were becoming agitated, their weapons wavering between Joran and their own leader. The patrol leader made a sharp gesture that seemed to command them to maintain discipline. If this is true, the alien said slowly, then my people have been manipulated for years. Our hatred of humans, your hatred of us, none of it was natural. Which means we're fighting the wrong war, Joran concluded. While we've been killing each other, the real enemy has been preparing to finish off whoever survives. The desperate plan. The patrol leader, who introduced himself as Subcommander Kythex, agreed to a temporary ceasefire while they investigated the claims. Within hours, more evidence began emerging from hidden sources across the galaxy. Zephyrian intelligence officers who had noticed inconsistencies in their orders. Human commanders who had questioned the timing of certain attacks. There is a facility, Kythex revealed during their impromptu war council. Heavily defended, both by my people and by creatures we were told were your secret weapons. If the architects exist, they would be coordinating operations from there. Joran studied the tactical display that Kythex had shared. The base was a fortress, surrounded by automated defenses and patrolled by what appeared to be hybrid human-Zephyrian technology. Getting inside would require the kind of coordinated assault that neither species could manage alone. My team specializes in impossible infiltrations, Joran said. But we'll need your people's technical expertise to bypass their security systems. And we will need your people's adaptability, Kythex replied carefully. My species excels at following plans. Yours excels at improvising when plans fail. The mission begins. The Joint Strike Team was unlike anything either species had ever assembled. 12 human Special Forces operators working alongside 8 Zephyrian commandos, sharing equipment, tactics, and for the first time in 2 years, a common purpose. The approach to the Architect facility required 3 days of travel through territory controlled by both human and Zephyrian forces. Every encounter risked exposure, friendly fire, or the collapse of their fragile alliance. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. Joran found himself impressed by Zephyrian tactical precision, while Kythex admitted grudging respect for human adaptability. When their transport was detected by automated defense drones, it was human creativity combined with Zephyrian technical skill that got them through undetected. Your people's unpredictability is useful, Kythex observed as they prepared for the final assault. Your people's attention to detail keeps us alive, Joran replied. Maybe that's why the architects wanted us to destroy each other. Separately, we're dangerous. Together, we might be unstoppable. The assault on truth. The facility was even more heavily defended than their intelligence had suggested. Automated weapons systems, energy barriers, and patrols of creatures that looked like nightmarish combinations of human and Zephyrian technology. The architects had been busy. But the joint team had advantages their enemies hadn't anticipated. Human soldiers created diversions while Zephyrian technicians disabled security systems. Zephyrian heavy weapons provided covering fire while human infiltrators slipped through gaps in the defenses. Fighting their way through the facility's outer rings, they encountered something that chilled them both to the bone. Holding cells filled with representatives from dozens of species, all apparently being studied and catalogued like specimens in a laboratory. How many civilizations have they done this to? Sergeant Mills whispered as they passed cell after cell of alien prisoners. Too many, Kythex replied. And we would have been next. In the facility's central chamber, they finally found what they were looking for. Banks of communication equipment, tactical displays showing the positions of human and Zephyrian fleets, and detailed psychological profiles of both species. Everything needed to manipulate two civilizations into mutual destruction. The true enemy revealed. The architect that confronted them in the control room was nothing like the creatures from Dr. Cross's recordings. This one had clearly been feeding on the conflict, growing stronger as the war progressed. Its form shifted between human and Zephyrian characteristics, as if it was absorbing the essence of both species. Impressive, it said in a voice that hurt to hear. Two species that should be extinct, working together. The manipulation protocols clearly require refinement. Joran and Kythex moved to flank the creature, their team spreading out to secure the room. The architect seemed amused rather than concerned. You believe you have won something, it continued. This facility is one of thousands. The war will continue with or without our direct intervention. Your species have learned to hate each other too well. Maybe, Joran said, raising his weapon. But they're also about to learn the truth about who their real enemy is. Kythex activated a communication beacon that would broadcast their findings to every ship, every base, every outpost within 50 light-years. The message was simple: cease hostilities immediately and unite against the true threat. The architect's amusement faded as it realized what they had done. You have doomed yourselves. Without our guidance, both species will collapse into chaos. Then we'll figure it out together, Joran replied, and pulled the trigger. As the facility exploded around them, the joint human-Zephyrian team escaped with proof that would change the course of galactic history. The war between their species wasn't over, but for the first time, they were fighting on the same side.